with innocent people, put a few 100 pounds of explosives and blow everybody up and say that this is the will of Allah. There's an insanity that's happening. There's an extremism that's happening that does not bode well for us as a civilization, as a people. Now, granted, Islam is going through many of the changes that Christianity went through. And so we have to be careful as Christians that we do not jump too heavily on those who are expressing their faith. Fanaticism, extremism, has to be looked at in context. Much of what we see as extremism came about as a direct result of our intervention, United States intervention, in other people's business. There was a program on TV just the other day. It was done on CNN, where they actually, line by line, legislation by legislation, explained to you how Bush, Cheney, Condoleezza, and Wolfowitz literally lie to people so that we can go into Iraq. So I'm not talking about the natural rebellion against intervention or against foreign invasion. I'm talking about the madness that occurs as a result of it. You want to bring Sharia into what? Sharia has to adapt itself to the needs of the culture of the people. You can't just, because Quran says slavery, then believe that we need slaves. That's how the South and Southern white Christians justified their discrimination, Jim Crow, and lynchings against black people. Christianity did the same thing. Christianity went through its fanatical stage. That's why I see this as a cyclical part. Islam is going through growth pains. It's going through the back and forth. It will resolve itself. It may take 100 years, may take 200 years. But Christianity went through the same. We were burning people at the stake not too long ago. 1492, they had an inquisition that would have scared Muslims today. Christians killed thousands, hundreds of thousands of people. We killed 80 million Indians, Native Americans, indigenous people, because they didn't believe in Jesus. Unbelievable. So we have no right to criticize anyone about extremism. It just so happens that they're in our way with regard to oil and expansion. That's what that's about. Sorry for hitting you so hard this morning, but I think we need to talk. We need to seriously talk about things. This is a fundraising drive, and I have a few thoughts that I'd like to share with you before we get really into it. Underneath me is Miles Davis, as you know. From the album Miles in the Sky, thing called Stuff. Went to a place called Shorehaven this week. What a wonderful place. If there was ever a Latin black community that has the potential for becoming the city on the hill, it's Shorehaven. Cheryl, how are you, baby? I want to say hello to the poet, Cheryl. Give me some stuff. I like your books, Cheryl. And I sat there and talked with some people. Darren invited me. Nellie invited me. And I went over there and had a good time with the folks. And I hope that Shorehaven becomes the model for black Puerto Rican black relations. Because it's a unity, it's a community that's beautiful. And they're moving forward. And if they celebrate each other's cultures and understand what time it is with regard to their children, Shorehaven is going to become the place that you want to live in, okay? I want to say hello to my boy who's right next door, Ricky. Mr. Rick Young is on from 6 to 8, WHCR, and I know people say, well, you're competing against each other. Listen, I'm from another generation. How are you, Ricky? Rick Young, WHCR, 930, 90.3 FM. On from 6 to 8, same time I am. He's doing CCNY radio. We now have the opportunity to jam ourselves again. The Republicans are playing it right to the end. They're going to hold back the funds. They do not want to approve of spending tax hikes because they say we've given enough. And they say that they will not back up the president anymore. They already gave him what he wanted, according to them. So now they're going to give up on, and they're willing to let the nation go through a sequester period in which, just here in New York City, 136,000 meals for homebound seniors are going to be gone. Head Start admissions will be gone. A lot of them. They'll be depleted. There'll be military cuts. Federal workers let go. What is it about these people? The president of Harvard University was on with Charlie Rose the other day. And Charlie, in his inimitable style, and he's very good at what he does with regard to topics that are what I call safe topics, white topics. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I just think he's, sort of the status quo guy. So he tried to prod this gentleman from Harvard University, and I can't remember his name, forgive me, because he was brilliant. He said, Charlie, how far does the president have to go? How far does he have to bend? He's done everything possible, everything. He's given them everything. There'll be cuts to Social Security. He's seriously thinking of cutting back on Social Security and Medicaid. What more do you want him to do? He said, and the media has to be blamed for this, because every time there's a stalemate, every time there's an impasse, they say, well, each of you has to give. Listen, if I've been giving you everything I can, just like a divorce, it's like a marriage, the woman has been given everything she can, the husband still wants more. Well, I want you to let me have 3 women now. She's let him go out on Friday. He can come back on Saturday morning, baby. I'm not going to question you. But he wants to stay out till Sunday, and he wants his girlfriend in the house. It's ridiculous. And we got some brothers like that. Don't tell me we don't. It's ridiculous. And I think it's high time black people understand, people of color understand, that the subtext of this, and I hate to say that, and I don't want to get into the victimization thing, but I have never seen the behavior directed toward a president that I've seen directed toward President Obama. And I can attribute it to one thing and one thing alone, y'all. Color. Not class. Don't get into it's class. This has to do with being black. Period. The end. It's unbelievable. Now we got the new thing is we have people, rumors about his sexual orientation, rumors about this one. Y'all got to shut up. Black folks have to really I believe that this is a God-given gift. He will become, he already is, in the annals of history. And so for those of you who continue to criticize, I would suggest you just shut the hell up. And ask your children, as they say down south, to try to imitate him rather than criticize him. Be nice if we had 200,000 Obamas all over the country, maybe more. I'm all for it. We are going to be doing a whole thing. We're pledging this week. And the number here is 516-620-3602. Ife's in the house. So we're going to be trying to talk to you about a film called, and I'm telling you, I heard, let me just stop for a minute. Let me explain to you something. And black people, I'm directing this especially to you. I know some of you going to say, there he goes, that Puerto Rican. He's going to start talking that black stuff. He's going to say, yeah, he doesn't know. You don't know what I know. I was raised with folks from North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia, basically. Some from Jacksonville. We won't talk about that. But I was raised with such a profound respect for black people. Not only because I was black, but also because I understand that if black people don't move, the nation fails. The nation begins to stagnate. Do you know that it was black movement that started the women's movement, the whole Latino movement in this country? Yes, I'm not afraid to say it. The Panthers prodded the young lords, at least here in New York City. So I bow in humility and in love and in respect for black movements and black leaders. What has happened to the nature of black leadership? Where are we now? And why are we not there? We can't point fingers at anyone else. We don't even have a black mob. People say, well, you know something? This guy's selling. Everybody else sold drugs, Liquor? What do you think the founding fathers were doing while they were sponsoring the revolution? Do you think they were getting money from the cotton and from the tobacco on the land? They were selling rum. They were running rum. And after they ran it and did they get it from the Caribbean, used African slaves to do it, and brought it over here. It was against the law. Liquid crack. And then after that, it was prohibition. And the Irish and the Italians and the Jews got into it. Jewish people got into it. Everybody goes into crime. It bothers me. I'm not saying that we should tell our children to do, but it bothers me when we cast such negative condemnation of people who are doing this. During Prohibition, it happened too. England gained its fame from pushing heroin on the Chinese. Y'all got to stop this now. We've got to legalize most of it. But you talk, John Kennedy, your revered president, his father was bringing whiskey into the country. How do you think he made his fortune, fool? They still get money, a penny off every bottle of scotch that comes into this country. And it amazes me that we have people who come, well, you know, them drugs, this and that. Stop it. If it wasn't for drugs and numbers in Harlem and all the black communities in this country, our people would implode. But we're the ones getting busted. You know, white folks, and folks, those are my white friends, know this to be true. They snort as much as we do, inject themselves as much as we do, take everything as much and don't get busted. And when they do get busted, they get less time. So I wish people would stop this hypocrisy. If you're going to do it, clean it up. Harlem doesn't have to be gentrified. East Harlem doesn't have to be gentrified. We made more money off drugs than any other people in the history of the planet. What have we done with the money? Don't get mad at Dominicans. They did so. They cleaned their money up, didn't they? They sure did. People talk about, well, you know, those Cubans. I sit with Latinos. No, those Cubans are very industrious. They're not industrious. They thieve. They're as thieving as anybody else. So more cocaine in Miami. In the 80s, Miami was built by cocaine money. So let's stop the nonsense and let's stop the hypocrisy. Christians included, Pentecostals included, the new Pharisees. Well, you know, I've seen them people out there doing it. Man, your grandfather was a hustler. Everybody was doing something. And when there's no money, they do even more. So don't get me started on that one. Bothers me when I hear that nonsense. Mexico is going to have to deal with its cartels. Yes, they will have to tell them, listen, let's put some shade on this. What do you think the United States did once the mob became out of control? They said, let's work this out. Let's work it out. Put some of that stuff, put some shade on some of that stuff. I tell the kids outside, do you want to get busted? Sitting out there like a fool, holding on to your genitals. Yo, man, I got some real stuff. You must want to. What happened to the elders who could tell them how to do that stuff? Yes, you're going to do time, by the way. Part of the unintended or maybe intended consequence of selling is you're going to do some time, unless you're smart enough to avoid it. People say, well, I don't know anybody who succeeded. I do. And I know people who built homes, bars, and everything. They went back down south and went back to the Caribbean. I don't know. You know, it's something is wrong with the way we think. One Sicilian gentleman told me one time, what we do is we just shut our mouths. You have to let everybody know what you're doing. And then, and I'm not advocating, I'm just saying, if you're going to do it, professionalize it and invest in your own community. Suddenly, in some Italian parish, $100,000 shows up. Do you think the priest is going to try to find out who gave him that money? They know what time it is. The church is one of the largest landholders in the history of the world. They're doing very well. Thank you. I don't care how many suits against them for pedophilia they get, and they're right in doing it and following through with the suits. But the church is doing exceptionally well. And don't tell me crime and religion don't go hand in hand. Please. And what I mean by that is, listen, I know a lot of number runners go to church, and they praise God, and I want them to. I know sisters who work the night, as you say, and they go and praise God. So what? It's the oldest profession in the world. We've got some real puritanical
and neither would they.
I started chopping cotton, I think, when I was about 6 or 7. And basically, I was very happy. I mean, I didn't know that we were poor, because everybody I knew, except the white folks, which we all knew lived differently, lived the same way we did. You know, I thought we were fine. My father was unable to read and write. He'd never gone to school. He was convinced that education was the only way black people had to get out of anything they were in. The straw boss, the agent, the guy who was hired to run the operation, like a business manager, was opposed to us going to school when there was work to be done. And he had a rule. He would go around and say, these kids are too big to be in school anyway, and they need to be in the field. And my father was so adamant about going out with his gun every morning.
Like it or not, this is a European civilization, a white man civilization. And it should remain that there were the Negroes considered to be more or less guests.
You knew you couldn't look white women look at them in the eye without getting in trouble.
Because you could be lynched for eye rape, which was really something that people believed in, that you were looking at a woman in a way that indicated you had bad intentions toward her.
Well, we have in Greenwood, I think we have wonderful relations with the colored people. It has been demonstrated through the years in all the businesses, type of businesses. The colored people are very happy, extremely happy in Mississippi.
And I think they feel just as warmly toward us.
That's a fact. Do you know anybody that disagrees with that?
I went to babysit for this white family, and the white woman called me upstairs. I went on upstairs in a hurry so as not to keep the white woman waiting. She said, Mr. Lawrence wants to see you. And I looked in the bed. Mr. Lawrence was laying there among the bedclothes. They were so silky. And I said, yes, sir, Mr. Lawrence, what you want with me? And he immediately pulled me down into the bed and had intercourse with me. I was 11 years old that day. It was my birthday. It was no reason for us to run tell our mother or our father, because they couldn't do anything about it but get killed if they said something about it. So many times, we girls would talk in the bathroom about it. You know, never telling our parents, but it happened very, very frequently.
Can you imagine being raped by a man? You're 11 years of age and you can't tell your mother and father. That was the South in those days. Can you imagine what slavery must have been like? The DVD is called Freedom on My Mind. And what we'd ask you to do is send us $125. Pledge WBAI $125, and we will send you this DVD called Freedom on My Mind. The number to call here is 516-620-3602. 516-620-3602. Again, 516-620-3602. I sat and watched this last night and began to cry. Now, I cried at the drop of a hat. Ife knows this. Don't get sedidly now. Don't get crazy, Ife. But I cried at the drop of a hat. But this knocked me out. Can you believe that if you were too big, you shouldn't be going to school because you were supposed to be picking cotton? And by the way, I don't know how many of you understand. Puerto Ricans, listen to me carefully. Before we begin to talk about other people, you have no idea of what picking cotton is. It hurts your hands. They got spikes in it, thorns, and the thorns will hurt you. I've seen black people's hands. They're all messed up. You say, Mama, what happened to your hands? I was picking cotton all my life. For 16 hours a day, 14 hours a day. I went to Tunica, Mississippi one time to do a report with Essence Television. And I had been hired by Susan Taylor, God bless her. And I went down there and stayed in the sun for about 15 minutes. Just 15 minutes in that hot Mississippi sun. My head, I got a scalp burn. And I got nappy hair. It's serious down there. It's serious. I have to admire black people who fought for civil rights in Mississippi because there are no mountains to run to, and there's no contours in there. It's just flat. Delta. So you can't dodge no bullets unless you run zigzag fashion. And even then, all they got to do is wait for you to make that zig, and they'll zag you. So I, to this day, admire black folk who actually toiled in that sun for hour upon hour upon hour. I'm here with Ife, 516-620-3602. Ife, anytime you want to jump in, you can. I'm flipping out over this. I can't believe this. Call us here, 516-620-3602. $125 pledge. We'll send you freedom on my mind. Ife, do you believe what you're listening to on this? It's unreal to me.
Well, not at all. Not at all, Felipe. And this is my first time seeing it, and this is we're not even 10 minutes in yet. And just hearing eye rape.
If you looked at a white woman, and you just looked at her, that's what happened to Emmett Till. It was, he whistled and got blown. I mean, and here in New York, we can look at anybody. You see sisters going out with white guys going out with black women, black guys going out with white women. It doesn't even occur to us that people fought to have that happen. You couldn't have an interracial marriage, Ife. You had to run out of town unless you were crazy and wanted to die. All of this was fought for in blood, Ife, and people don't get it. That's why I think we need... Very often we say, why do we have to hear about the Holocaust all the time? 6 million who died. Well, we had 30 million Africans, 80 million, and you're absolutely right. We should be putting those images up, but we should never forget the Holocaust. We should never forget what happened to black people, and we should never forget what the Spanish and Portuguese did to the to Native Americans. We should never forget what the Belgians did to the Congolese. So I don't get mad at other people for remembering their tragedies. We need to remember ours. And we need to remember how we fought to get us where we are today. Granted, we've come this far by faith. No doubt about it.
But still,
we suffered tremendously. And I think the trauma of black poverty, the trauma of black lack of education, the trauma of black self-esteem comes directly from slavery. And you can say, well, no, we've gone past it. No. The soul, the DNA doesn't forget the trauma, Ife.
Not at all. Not at all.
And let me just give you an example. My mother I told you how my mother used to beat me, right?
Quite often, almost every show.
I still remember it. I love my mother, don't get me wrong, but I remember the beatings. And a butt whipping will, you do remember that stuff. Jail, I get up in the nighttime sometimes and I think I'm in the joint. So, and that was years ago. So can you imagine what slavery has done to a whole people? So Ife, I mean, then we get mad at black men for not jumping up, but we were made to stand there when our wives were being raped. Gil Noble, may he rest in peace, told me one day, and then we're going back to the DVD called Freedom on My Mind. For $125, we ask that you pledge. Give us $125. Do that for us, for me, for WBAI,
and for yourself as well.
And for yourselves.
It's
you do it for yourselves too. Here at 516-620-3602. Start calling right now. I know I get to talking too much, and Ife always tells me stop talking and get people.
Well, no, you're getting better.
But am I getting better? Thank you, Jesus. 516-620-3602. I was talking to Gil Noble one day, right before he died. He said, Felipe, I got this from a sister who got this from her great-great-grandmother. She said what the black woman would do to the children who were on the plantation and say, Mr. Johnson's going to call you inside. He's going to ask you to come into his bed. He's going to penetrate you. It's going to hurt. There's a way you can move your hips so that you don't have a baby. There's a way you can do it so when it happens, and he orgasms, you will not have his child. There's a way you can move your hips. There's a way to do it. And they had to actually teach their children this.
Wow, that's deep.
So that it happened, and she would tell him, and he did it to me, and he's going to do it to you, and Daddy is very upset about it, but there's nothing Daddy can do. Can you imagine having to sit there, watch, and know that your wife is being raped, know that your child is, and you can't do anything about it? I've always said America is blessed by black people, because any other people would have burned this place down to the ground a long time ago.
Long time ago. But I think people should call up. Yep, 516-3620-3602. I don't know what number you just gave, but it's 516. You said 3 a few times.
I said 620.
Yeah, okay.
3602. You trying to make me see now.
620. Well, 36.
Well, nothing. No, nothing. 516-620-3620. I'm sorry. I'm dyslexic.
Exactly.
516-620-3602. You're right, Ife. 516-620-3602. That's a dyslexic thing I have. I change the numbers sometimes. 516-620-3602. Would you call us here? Call us here and let us give you Freedom on My Mind, a DVD about black folks in the South, Puerto Ricans, Dominicans, young whites, older whites. This is a DVD you all need to have. You need to understand the history of this country. It ain't pretty. And I'm particularly concerned with black folk because what happens is we forget the pain.
Forget it. I mean, and you know what? This is kind of similar to what's going on, but I don't know if you heard about that magazine that took the young white girl, 16 years old, and bronzed her, kind of almost blackface, and titled it African Queen.
Oh, Jesus. Oh, listen, we have a councilman here, a conservative Jewish American, Dov Hikind, who for Purim, which is a religious holiday, after the harvest, Jews would have a religious holiday to celebrate the success of the harvest, and he was in blackface and put on a big Afro wig. Now, what was that about? Didn't he understand what he was trying? Didn't he understand what blackface means to us? And he said, and then he was arrogant about it and said on the air, I'm sorry if I offended people. I didn't mean to.
Well, that's basically how the magazine came at it. Like, well, I'm sorry if you're offended.
If you're upset, but I wasn't.
But, this is art. But at the end of the day, if you're going to title something, it's like forgetting history, forgetting the past. And that's basically what you're saying right now, is remembering and understanding that there's too much painful history to do something on that level. Whereas you take someone especially when you had something like the New York City Fashion Week, Fashion Week.
Fashion Week, in Bryant Park.
And 82% of the models were white. And the other 18% was everybody else.
Everybody else.
And when you look at that was an issue. And you have all these young girls, black women, black girls who are trying to come up in this fashion industry. And you take a young, blonde-haired, blue-eyed white girl. And
that is the image of beauty.
But bronze her
and put her out as
African
queen.
And so it's just and unfortunately, in reading the blogs and reading some of the online sites, there were comments made by other black folks saying, well, I don't see what the issue is. Some, not all, but there were a few.
We have those who say we've moved beyond it. Listen, I'll be very honest with you. GQ we got the other side too. GQ had the cover of, on their cover was Beyonce 2 issues ago. And I swear to you, she's not that light now. On the cover, I mean, they had highlighted her, whatever they did, she looked like a blonde white woman. So it's nowadays, how many black models do you see on TV advertising products?
If it's not the big ones, Naomi and all of that.
You hardly see her on. And now the new thing is to take someone who looks kind of Latino or black, so you get a twofer.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
They do that a lot.
They do that a lot. So it's and I haven't even.
So it's kind of going backwards. In the 80s, we were kind of 70s, 80s.
We were moving into blackness,
and then
we moved back into let's be as light as we can and let's not offend massa. We do this among Puerto Ricans too, by the way. Latinos are famous for this. If you watch the 41 and 47.
Yes, every so
Tommy Davidson does a whole thing on these Spanish programs. They have, I'm telling you, they only have white folks on. I was talking to a sister the other day about Brazil. I was talking to a lady named, she's a white woman. Yesterday we were discussing this, along with another. I had a great conversation with her and another gentleman, and they were saying she's been to Brazil several times. And the gentleman was telling me, well, Brazil, I said to him, Tom, I think his name is, he's Polish. Both of them are Polish, by the way. And they were saying that they really feel that Brazil is moving forward. And she had said she'd been there several times. I said, Brazil is as backward as you can get. I mean, they still have a whole concept of inferiority based on the Portuguese. And their thing is, I'm mulatto, I'm not black. Still black people are being treated. And by the way, the couple I was talking to were fantastic. They really understood it. But, baby, Brazil is just as bad. And by the way, most of the black people who were brought to the New World brought to Brazil. I don't know why we think we're the only ones. So, folks, call us here. 516-620-3602. 516-620-3602. For $125, we'll give you this DVD. For the pledge of $125, got to be careful. We will send this DVD to you, Freedom on My Mind. Shall we go into some more?
Sure.
This is WBAI in New York, Freedom on My Mind, the DVD of the courage of black and white kids to desegregate the South.
But after I was raised at 11, I started having men right and left, you know. So I was easy, and I walked sassy, and I would cuss. I could out-cuss a longshoreman.
And I hated it. I had all kind of fantasies about, I was fascinated by people like David and Goliath stories. These are my favorite biblical characters, the cats who kicked folks' butt. You know, I liked Moses drowning everybody in the Red Sea. I used to go in the woods. I used to go in the backwoods and preach and scream, fight them, run into bushes and hit trees and pretend they was white folk.
So you learn how to negotiate your life with white folks, and I guess you also learn the fear associated with them of how much power they actually held over you, how they could determine whether you continue to live or whether you died.
The civil rights movement changed forever the old relationship between blacks and whites. It started in the 50s and gathered new momentum in 1960 when black college students began staging sit-ins and freedom rides. Their dramatic confrontations at segregated lunch counters and bus stations stunned the nation and galvanized blacks across the South.
For all you freedom lovers, the news I have to tell, how those freedom fighters came to Mississippi to build. Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
And I was really excited about that. I would run home every evening and listen to it, and every weekend when the newspapers came, we would read about it in the newspapers, and it was people saying we aren't taking this stuff anymore, who stood right up and looked them in the eye in a way that I had never seen anybody do white folks.
These young people were willing to take risks. They cared enough about what they thought was important, what was necessary, to be willing to do something about it. And that is what attracted me. That is what attracted me, because I was always out there trying to do something about something, but the support system was never there.
There was such an enormous feeling of pride that we all felt in their activity and their action. It just kind of radiated all over. It gave you almost chills to see people actually hitting away at this system of segregation that existed for so long. And it was young people that were a lot like ourselves, and they looked so magnificent. I mean, both the men and the women. And they were so nicely dressed, and that was a part of it. I mean, they were all dressed up, and they just gave you just an overwhelming sense of pride and accomplishment.
I became aware, as we all were, that the freedom rides started. The buses were going south, and they refused to segregate at the southern borders where the law would kick into place. That is, if you went from Tennessee to Mississippi, you suddenly had to go to the back of the bus. Well, the freedom buses were going down to break the segregated South.
But I don't know, they freedom riders till the bus stopped in Jackson and they get off. And they go in the white side, and I'm looking at... Here, for once in my life, my fantasies were being played out in real life for me. I had always wanted to be in a position where I could fight the white man and win. These people were winners. I'm with them.
If this was young people that was challenging all this, and it was ordinary people that were challenging all this, and it was like, it was the call. It was the first time I really heard the call, which is what it was.
The students formed their own integrated organization called SNCC. Their symbol, black and white hands joined together. The Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee attracted young people from around the country, including a young math teacher from New York City, Bob Moses. Moses had grown up in the Harlem projects, then attended all-white Hamilton College.
The sit-ins, when they broke out, just grabbed me, the pictures of the Southern students. And what I became aware of looking at them was that they looked how I felt. And I really responded immediately to that.
On a tour through the South, Moses met with leaders of Mississippi's underground civil rights network, men like the NAACP's Amzie Moore and Earl Steptoe. Moore wanted to take advantage of the new student energy, and he persuaded Moses to head up SNCC's first voting rights project in Macomb, Mississippi.
There was a pull to go south. Then I discovered SNCC. I was traveling by bus, and a couple of youngsters escorted me to the bus station, and they were looking to see, now where is this room? So I sat on the front on a long ride, and there was no one else on the bus, you know, so there was never any confrontation. The rumors were going around that there was some of these freedom riders who were invading, you know, the town.
And these people said they're the same people who done beat up the white folks down there in Nashville and made them submit to an integrated lunch counter setup. And they're the same folks who've been working on the freedom ride. They're the same folks who worked with Martin and the boycotts. They're the same folks who had the sit-ins in Greensboro, North Carolina. And we here to make a change in Mississippi. So I said, goddamn, this is it. A sister at church said Martin Luther King's brother was in Macomb. And so we hitched the road, and somewhere in that night, we decided to go the next day to look for Martin Luther King's brother, which turns out to be Bob Moses.
Moore convinced Moses that the only way to crack Mississippi was through the vote. The state had 500,000 blacks, but would not allow them to register. A voting campaign could turn the country's attention to this injustice and pull the federal government into their fight.
Now, this strategy was explained to the feds, to the Kennedy boys. They bought into that.
Because the Justice Department believed that if you could break the caste system in voting, and that there was open and free voting by all people, that was the quickest and best way to break the entire caste system.
When these boys would come to town, we'd sit and talk like we sit and talking here. When John Doe would come to town, we'd sit and talk like this. So as we would talk talk about this stuff within our midst, there was the understanding that we were all working on the same agenda.
We want you to come down to the courthouse tomorrow.
What?
We're having a Freedom Day for registration.
Okay.
We want you to come down tomorrow and register.
Now, y'all ain't gonna march. Y'all can't march.
No, ma'am, we're not gonna march. We just gonna go down to the courthouse.
Because I ain't able.
Yes, ma'am, we understand.
See the strategy?
You're listening to Freedom on My Mind, a DVD about the freedom riders in the South. It really is a story of courage on the front lines in the battle against fear and ignorance. I should let you know that the Birmingham, Alabama police commissioner was a guy named Bull Connors. And I'll never forget that name because it was embedded in my mind week after week when I would read the reports coming up from the South. Now, he, together with the police sergeant Tom Cook, who was Ku Klux Klan man supporter, organized violence against the Freedom Fighters with local Ku Klux Klan chapters. They made a plan to bring the Freedom Riders to an end in Alabama. They assured Gary Thomas Rove, who was an FBI informer, by the way, and a member of the Eastview Claverne, number 13, the most violent Klan group in America, in Alabama at that time, that the mob, listen to this, this is the police commissioner, she said, y'all have 50 minutes to attack the Freedom Riders on the bus without any of us making an arrest. The plan was to allow an initial assault in Anniston, Alabama, with the final assault taking place in Birmingham. May 14th, Mother's Day, in Anniston, group of Klansmen, some still in church clothing, church attire, attacked the first of the two buses because the Greyhounds, of course, would have some, if you were black, you had to go to the back, and whites were in the front. And the Freedom Riders were saying, we're not having that. We're sitting wherever we want to. The driver tried to leave the station but was blocked by KKK members who slashed its tires. The mob forced the crippled bus to stop several miles outside of town and then firebombed it, trying to kill the people and burn them alive inside the bus. They held the doors shut. Now, some people disagree on this. They don't know exactly what happened, but after the fuel tank exploded, they say someone maybe brandished a revolver, caused the mob to retreat, and the riders escaped the bus. But once they got out of the bus, the white mob beat black folk, both black and white kids, after they escaped the bus, and it was only when some warning shots were fired into the air by highway patrolmen that the riders were prevented from being lynched. Black people take note, particularly in New York. I don't care if you're in Bed-Stuy, if you're in Brownsville, if you're in Ozone Park, if you're in Rosedale, if you're in Wyandanch, if you're in East Harlem, if you're in, Williamsburg, you must hear this story. Because this is how you got to where you are. That night, the Freedom Riders, most of them who had been refused care, were removed from the hospital at 2 a.m. because the staff thought that the Klan was going to come into the hospital and kill them. When the Trailways bus reached Anniston, Alabama, and pulled in at the terminal an hour after the Greyhound bus was burned, it was boarded by 8 Klansmen. They beat the Freedom Riders, left them semi-conscious. One guy got 50 stitches. One white guy got 50 stitches. When the bus arrived in Birmingham, Alabama, it was attacked by a mob of KKK members, aided and abetted by the police under the orders of Commissioner Bull Connor. As the riders exited the bus, they were beaten by the mob with baseball bats, iron pipes, bicycle chains. They had an FBI informant among them, a guy named Gary Thomas Rowe, but he was with them. White Freedom Riders were singled out for frenzied beating. James Peck required more than 50 stitches to the wounds in his head. Peck was taken to Caraway Methodist Medical Center, which refused to treat him. He was later treated at Jefferson Hillman Hospital. Robert Kennedy, who was Attorney General at the time, heard about this, and he urged restraint on the part of the Freedom Riders. He told them, cool out. He sent an assistant to Alabama to try to calm the situation. You know the rest. He arranged for an escort for the riders in order to get them to Montgomery. However, radio reports told of the mob waiting for the riders at the bus terminal as well as the route to Montgomery. The Greyhound clerks told the riders that the drivers were refusing to drive any Freedom Riders anywhere. And recognizing that their efforts had already been called widespread attention to the civil rights cause and wanting to make the rally at New Orleans, the rioters decided to abandon the rest of the bus ride and fly directly to New Orleans from Birmingham. When they first boarded the plane, all passengers had to exit because of a bomb threat. Listen, folks, there are no laws, no black laws, the white folks are bound to respect. And it's about time that we hear this. And by the way, justice does not mean that we call the bull conners or we just arrest them. There has to be reparation. There has to be restitution. It's not just about, well, we're sorry. I don't want to hear that. Sorry, make sure that you give those people who participate, give all black people reparations. Do something for them. Give them some equity, particularly in these times of trouble, so they can buy their own homes. Go down south, buy some land. 40 acres and a mule with inflation. Cost of living increase. This station is WBAI in New York. This DVD is called Freedom on My Mind, and we're asking that for $125 you send us as a pledge. We'll send this DVD to you. 516-620-3602. 516-620-3602. I'll give you that number again. And by the way, Latinos, I'm not in any way, shape, or form absolving us of what's happened. 516-620-3602. We went through the same thing in Latin American countries. Trujillo and the Dominican Republic actually imported Spaniards because he said black was he wasn't feeling it. And so he imported Spaniards to lighten up the race, adelantar la raza. That inferiority, it's ridiculous. In Puerto Rico, we still have this thing. People say, well, Puerto Rico's come a long way. Yeah. Let me tell you how far we've come in Puerto Rico. There was the Democrats won all of the municipal elections in Puerto Rico, Ife. The one black candidate they have for resident commissioner, who's the guy who kind of goes along with the Commonwealth and tries to propagate or tries to move forward the aims of the government, the one black candidate was not elected. That's how much we love black people in Puerto Rico. So I don't want to hear how much Puerto Ricans have moved beyond that. We still have that problem. And unless Puerto Ricans understand that they're black that they understand their blackness, we will not be healthy. WBAI in New York. This is Felipe Luciano. We'll be right back after this break.
Every time I sing a song, I sing for my Georgia. Oh, Georgia. Get it hold me through this old sweet song. Keeps Georgia on my mind. Georgia on my mind. Hey, Georgia, oh yeah. Yeah, Georgia, and a song of you, from such sweet and clear, it's moonlight through the pines. Other arms will reach out to me. Yeah. Other eyes will smile tenderly here and now. Still in peaceful dreams I see all along the road. Ooh, it is like the Georgia on mine. I feel that other arms reach out to me. Other eyes smile tenderly. Still in peaceful dreams I see Missy Road. Now the road leads back to you. Oh, Georgia, and I know, no peace I find. Won't you hear me now? It's just this old sweet song. I said, keep Georgia on my mind. Well, on my mind. On my mind. Yeah, it's an old sweet song. Keep Georgia, on my mind. You know the little girls that are on my mind. Yes,
The late, great Ray Charles with the Count Basie Orchestra, Georgia on My Mind. For those of you who don't know this, Basie loved Ray Charles. Ray Charles was a great jazz pianist, and along with Quincy Jones formed a great band, toured around Europe, didn't make much money. They had to break up, but Quincy Jones knew talent. Quincy Jones was a trumpet player. And so those of you who know him as Michael Jackson's producer, you have no idea of his background. Man was in Europe taking care of business. One of the most incredibly talented Renaissance men in America, a modern-day Mozart, Mr. Quincy Jones. Of course, what you just heard was Ray Charles. This is WBAI in New York, 99.5 on your FM dial. My name is Felipe Luciano, and I'm proud to tell you that for years, I have always advocated that we teach history in our schools. That is why I'm so upset that so much of the liberal arts program is being taken away. How are you going to know who you are if you don't know who you were? We fought for bilingual programs. We fought for Puerto Rican studies. We fought for Latino studies. We fought for black studies. All of those programs have slowly been eliminated. And like it is now here and now. Nothing like it was, because we didn't fight for it. And remember, each of these TV stations has a license that you can contest. We need to pressure stations to program stuff that is meaningful to us as a people. We did it in the 60s. There's no reason why we can't do it now. And I think now it's even more important. We are offering you a DVD called Freedom on My Mind. And it's a DVD that talks about the freedom riders in the South and what they had to go through just to desegregate lunch counters, schools, voting booths. You couldn't vote. That's why it annoys me no end when I see people. I don't feel like voting. They don't do nothing for me. I don't feel like voting. They're all the same. Fool. So your grandmother died for nothing then. I don't feel like going to school. I want to drop out. With pants below the butts. Listen, sometimes I look at the clothing and I'm wondering if we're not back in slavery. I wonder if black folk were given, listen to me carefully, and I'm including Latinos in this. If we were given, if somebody said, I'm going to give you a little shack, a little piece of plot of land, a shack, you won't make any money, but I'll give you 3 meals a day. Would we take it? We wouldn't have to, and I'll give you 3 sumptuous meals a day. No salary. I wonder if we wouldn't go right back to slavery. Because some of us are sure acting like that. No, you won't have any equity, sir. No, you won't be able to send your kids to college, but you know what? You will eat, and that's important. I wonder how many of us would not say yes a mouse and go right along with that nonsense.
Honestly, I think there's a few.
Because we're almost doing it now. 516-620-3602. 516-620-3602.
You are on a roll today.
I'm on it. I saw this and I started crying in the bedroom. I couldn't stop crying. I had to get on my knees and say, keep me from acting out. Because see, the problem with me is I want to do something. And I don't want to go to jail again, Ife. I don't mind for something real. I'm hoping that the old warriors decide not to develop revolutionary menopause and get crazy and do something political. We need to do this. A lot of young people don't understand, so we need to teach them. We need fathers for these young men. We need mothers for these young women. I'd like to see you out there talking to these young girls, Ife, because some of them just do not respect themselves.
I do every so often.
Every so often. It's wonderful. I heard this young girl speak. Well, and I told that B on the train loudly. I said,
not just that, calling each other. The first time I started really hearing other girls, young girls, calling each other the N-word.
Oh yeah. No, but then they say,
like,
but then they're using masculine terms to.
That's what I'm saying.
They'll say, "Suck my." You say what?
That's it.
What?
All of that, and I'm like, wow. This is. It was quite different for me.
No respect.
No respect for each other or themselves.
And we need to do. And by the way, there's a regality. I don't know how many of you know older black people. Some of you who are white may have come across one black teenager with no respect and may now condemn an entire race. I think you're being wrong in that. The same way I don't allow one white person from a particular ethnic group who does something wrong to me and condemn the entire race, I don't think you should either. There are black folks. I grew up with black folks who are so regal, so beautiful. As Fannie, I was talking to Abi O'Doon, one of the last poets, yesterday, and he said when he spoke to Fannie Lou Hamer down south, he said, why do you take this? He said, we know they brought us over here to teach them. They children. Imagine the love of that. Now, I don't particularly believe that. And I don't want to cater to that. I don't want to have to be mamas and daddies to these folk. But she said, they ignorant. They are ignorant. They need to be, they're like children. And it's when you hear that kind of love, let me give you a little example. One day, this cop, Ife, by the way, don't stop calling 516-620.
Before, can I say something?
Yes,
Can I say thank you to the people that's called?
You sure may.
Because I really want to hear what you have to say
today. I love that. Go ahead, Ife.
Well, because you, just like I get on you, you've been getting on me, so I'm trying to be a little nicer.
Thank you, Jesus.
So, some of the people that's called up, there's a few people that didn't want to give their names, but I'm going to give the names of those. Masika from Cambria Heights, Anthony, Mr. Lopez from the Bronx, Marcia from Queens Village, Regina from Queens, and Virginia from Somerset, New Jersey, and William from Jamaica as well. So we haven't had anyone from Brooklyn.
No, but nobody from Brooklyn, nobody from Jersey, nobody from Harlem.
I just said Jersey.
Yeah, but, I'm sorry, right. We've had nobody from Harlem, though.
Well, no.
516-620-3602. 516-620-3602.
I'm sorry, I cut you off.
No, that was all right. I was in the Young Lords. We had just started the Young Lords. And I had just come out of jail, and I was incensed. I know we needed to do something. I saw this huge cop, happened to be white, beating up this drug addict, and I saw the dealers who had just sold him the doogie watching it like impassively. Because apparently they'd worked out a deal with the police. We'll let one go. You can beat up one and we can continue selling. So I don't know what got into me. And I walked into the crowd and I touched the policeman on the shoulder. I said, officer, are you going to arrest this man? And he didn't even turn around to look at me and said, who is this guy? Who the hell is this guy? And none of the Puerto Ricans said, they all knew me, but they didn't want to rat me out or they just said nothing. So he continued to hit him with that blackjack. In the old days, the cops had something in the back of their pockets, about 6 inches long, leather-bound stick, sort of a leather-bound baton with lead in it. With lead in it. Wow. And when they hit you, you felt it. Well, he started beating him again. And now, as he was beating him, and this was a white Puerto Rican, so the blood was just, it was thick. It wasn't even blood that was thin. You could see the cranial fluid coming out. It looked like jelly. I said, sir, in my best unaccented English, sir, are you going to arrest this man? And now he really got annoyed and turned and he said, who that? And that's all they wrote. That's all they wrote. That's all he remembers. I don't know what got into me. I just couldn't take it. Now, I do not recommend this for people, by the way. Because in those days, yes, they killed, but not as frequently. So I had to cut out and had to go underground and all that stuff. But it was incredible. Now, as I'm doing this guy, and believe this is not meant as a hate-filled diatribe against police. Not at all. Men in blue are needed. Women in blue are needed. I just think that sometimes we go overboard. And I think particularly black cops, Puerto Rican cops, should be very concerned with the racism that they see in the police department. Very concerned with it. Because that silence that you do, the silence with which you keep secrets to yourself is killing our community. The stop and frisk is killing our community. You know it too. Long story short, as I was hitting him, one of the black Puerto Rican ladies grabbed my wrist in midair and said, "Baby, no haga eso. He's the son of a mother." The compassion that they had. They didn't want, and I was incensed. It was over for me. This is what I love about black people. That they will stop you. When I used to get crazy, they used to say, "Come over here, let me rub your hair." Because they knew I was off. So all they needed to do was rub my hair. So when people tell me that black people don't have love in their hearts, that they don't love their children, people in Florida call, and I hung out so much when people from Jacksonville, I call them children. I still call them children. They used to say, "Herein, come here." Do you ever heard that? Black folk from the South wouldn't say, "Come here." They said, "Come here." And I don't know. So I said, "Yes, ma'am." And they would sit with me and they said, "Gay God, look at that little boy. Look at that. He knows how to read." They said, "Read for me, baby." And I'd be reading in the 3rd and 4th grade. I'd be reading to them. They said, "I can't believe this baby. Mr. Rowe, this baby reads like that." And I go reading Dick and Jane and Curious George. My self-esteem would soar. So when I look at these older black women on the bus, and they come over saying, "Give me some sugar," I always give them sugar. Friends of mine say, "How could you? Ooh, they're old." I said, "Man, don't you understand? Don't you get it? Those are the people who saved my life. Those are the people who made New York what it is. People from North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia." So I'm about giving credit where credit is due. And now I wish that the young black people begin to get it together. And the way to get it is first school and then beginning to police themselves in a sense. The number here is 516-620-3602. 516-620-3602. We're going to give you some more. Is there anything else you wanted to say?
Oh, no. I was just going to repeat what you just said, which was just the number and the name of the DVD.
The DVD is called Freedom on My Mind. It is important. I'm going to read you all a poem before we leave.
For $125.
$425 is the pledge. I want to read you a poem later about Yusef. You want me to read it later? Oh, we'll read it later. It's about Yusef Hawkins and Bensonhurst and what happened there, and what I think might. Well, you'll get the poem later. 516-620-3602.
And I hope more people will call, because right now there's no one on the line, but we need more people on the line and call and pledge their support to WBAI, to Wake Up Call with Felipe Luciano, and to yourself as history. I mean, Felipe's been talking about history all morning long, and just like I said, you've been hot. You've been real hot and on a roll today. But we need you to be on a roll as well and pick up that phone. 516-620-3602. We're actually extending the fund drive another week because clearly we need the funds. We're now up in Harlem. We're up at HCR sharing their studios, and it's amazing that family, came and really helped us out. We needed our family, and right now we're calling out on our family, and that's you, to show your support. And that number is 516-620-3602. Freedom on My Mind is the name of the DVD, $125, and it could be yours. And we're not even 20 minutes into the DVD, and you can hear how incredibly
impactful it is. It's very dramatic. This was produced and directed by Connie Field and Marilyn Mulford. Two women. It's an incredible story. Nominated for an Academy Award. It tells the story of the freedom movement. Folks, Bob Moses, young black student, who was then a Harvard student, recalls how he went to Mississippi, the center of massive resistance to integration in South, to head the SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. They had a voter registration drive. Now, I want you to understand this, because some of us get so caught up in what we see as white versus is black that we forget that 1,000, mostly white college students from around the country, joined the freedom fighters. And so when you hear whites who say, but I was there, it's about what you do today. Let's give credit to those who did fight. Now, granted, there are struggles today, and we can't rest on our laurels, but don't forget that there was a time in this country when white students and black students and white students aided black students in desegregating the South. And that's why we have a Voting Rights Act of today, and that's why we have a black president. Ladies and gentlemen, freedom on my mind.
The class, teach them how to interpret the Constitution, take them to the registrar's office the next day.
And I really think that this is something that I could do the rest of my life. It would still be something here to be done in this area.
Bob's focus was to try to just hit all these little towns around Macomb. Talatown, Amite, Magnolia. I think we ended up in Brookhaven knocking on doors and trying to get people to register to vote. I don't remember a break from that day. For me, I think that was a river of no return.
A great change is at hand, and our task, our obligation, is to make that revolution, that change, peaceful and constructive for all. Those who do nothing are inviting shame as well as violence. Those who act boldly are recognizing right as well as reality.
Friends, I'm a Mississippi segregationist, and I am proud of it.
In 1960, the Democratic Party became a house divided. John Kennedy occupied the White House. But Democrats, called Dixiecrats, ruled the South and resisted any attempts at change.
Our forefathers did not intend to share this country with the Japanese or with the Eskimo or with the Negro as equals, because civilization and savagery can never be equal.
In Mississippi, segregation was written into the bylaws of the state's Democratic Party, and it was carried out by an official alliance of lawmakers, police forces, and white citizens' councils. The Magnolia State would be the battleground for the South's last stand.
From the governor, through the legislature, through the judiciary, down through the sheriffs and all the counties and the highway patrolmen, the whole state was organized to promote and enforce racism, right? It was a kind of little South African enclave within the United States.
We have had experience in the past with Negro political domination. It was known as the Reconstruction. There are some who call this present attempt to build up political power through the mass registration of unqualified Negro voters the second Reconstruction.
They were very strict on that voter registration question. It was like, y'all ain't gonna register to vote, period.
No, Jennings, you didn't pass it. You see there, you didn't fill out, but just look there, you just filled out that part, and look, you didn't write anything in there. You didn't pass it. You have to fill it out complete before you pass it.
They failed me and told me I was disqualified to register.
My son, 4 years in college, and he's the secretary of the NAACP, and he didn't pay it.
Well, nobody asked me any question except how old I was, and didn't ask any interpretation of anything.
And I said, well, I can't answer that. And then he laughed. And he says, well, this is the question that we give to some. Meaning that this was the question that they give to many of the Negroes, a question that they knew that they couldn't answer.
SNCC joined with other civil rights groups like CORE and the NAACP to form COFO, the Council of Federated Organizations. Word of their efforts spread quickly through the surrounding counties, and local whites responded, Mississippi style.
Well, you can count them one by one. It could be your son. Count them 2 by 2. It could be me or you. Count them 3 by 3.
Southwest Mississippi was peculiar even for that area because it was like you were back in the 17th century. It was very rural. It was isolated, and it was mean country.
Several of us were actually beaten and
I was arrested also in connection with taking people to the registrar's office.
Less than 3 months after Moses' arrival, a white state legislator named E.H. Hurst drew his revolver on a black man involved in the voter registration campaign. Herbert Lee, member of the NAACP, farmer and father of 9, was killed by a bullet to the head. Hurst claimed self-defense and was acquitted.
Herbert Lee was one of the first people to go down and register to vote in mid-county that Bob had taken down.
Hurst and Lee knew each other and played together when they were young. Even into their adult life, had helped each other. But Hurst was deeply affected by Lee's involvement in this kind of political activity. And he felt that it was within his purveyance to actually to assassinate Lee.
We have walked through the shadows of death.
We took it upon ourselves to go out nightly searching for people who had witnessed the killing. It was really very scary. You were afraid of every headlight that came up either behind you or past you.
It was terrible, but we looked to see what jurisdiction. We tried to have it. We had an FBI investigation. We never were able to make a criminal case out of that.
That was our first encounter with this, and in many ways I was directly involved and felt personal responsibility.
Well, the problem there is that I had to come to grips with that problem a long time ago in terms of my own self. And there's a real moral question in terms of involvement of other people. One way is that to be very careful about telling people about the risks involved, so that they have their own decision to make as to whether they're willing to risk that kind of danger. And the question of personal fear just has to be constantly fought. I mean, it's just something that's an inside question.
To which there's no easy answer.
And I don't know if there's any answer at all.
And I remember Bob just devastated by what had happened. By this time, Bob is my...
They're talking about Bob Moses of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee and what had happened and how the local authorities allowed stuff to happen. Let me just read you a little bit of what was going down in 1961. They had already, on May 20th, they had beaten up some people in Alabama, beaten them up bad, both black and white. The highway patrol abandoned the bus and riders at Montgomery. At the bus station, a white mob awaited and beat the Freedom Riders with baseball bats and iron pipes. The local police allowed the beatings to go uninterrupted. White Freedom Riders were singled out for particularly brutal beatings. Reporters and news photographers were attacked first and their cameras destroyed. But one reporter took a photo later of Jim Zwerg at the hospital showing how he was beaten and bruised. This young white kid. They gave him 50 stitches on his head. There was a guy named Siegenthaler, a Justice Department official, was beaten and left unconscious, lying in the street. Ambulances refused to take the wounded to the hospital. Local blacks rescued them, and a number of the Freedom Fighters were hospitalized. On the following night, Sunday, May 21st, more than 1,500 black people packed Reverend Ralph Abernathy's First Baptist Church to honor the Freedom Riders. Among the speakers were Reverend Martin Luther King, who was based in Montgomery, Reverend Shuttlesworth, and James Farmer, who was of CORE at the time. That's when CORE made sense. Outside, a mob of more than 3,000 whites attacked blacks with a handful of the United States Marshal Service protecting the church from assault and firebombs, with city and state police making no effort to restore order. President Kennedy threatened to commit federal troops. Governor Patterson of Alabama forestalled that by finally ordering the Alabama National Guard to disperse the mob, which reached the church in the early morning. The mob broke windows of the church with rocks, set off tear gas canisters. Several people remember the heroic action by King after learning that black taxi drivers were arming and forming a group to rescue the people inside. He worried that more violence would result. He selected 10 volunteers who would promise nonviolence to escort him through the white mob, which parted to let King and his escorts pass as they marched 2 by 2. King went out to the black drivers and asked them to disperse to prevent more violence. King and his escorts formally made their way back inside the church unmolested. Lafayette also was, this is a guy, Bob Lafayette, who was interviewed by BBC. He told about these events in an episode. We can get mad at King for not telling the cab drivers to shoot. I'm not sure I would have done it. I mean, you beat me that way, something's going to give. However, for maybe he was God-driven, maybe something, but he actually told them to not arm yourselves because it's just going to cause more problems. That's why when he was assassinated, so many of us went off. Because this was a black minister. You know, like you have an uncle who's always a nice guy. You always the crazy one. And suddenly he gets killed and you say, that's it. There's no hope. And that's when the cities went crazy. It's WBAI in New York. My name is Felipe Luciano. This is 99.5 on your FM dial. This is the only place to be on Friday mornings from 6 to 8. One sister, Cheryl, told me, I get up in the morning and when I miss you by 5 minutes, I get so mad because there's so much to hear here. Listen, for $125, a pledge. If you call this number, 516-620-3602, and Ife's right, I'm not giving the number out enough. 516-620-3602.
Or you're doing it wrong, backwards.
516-620-3602.
No. I said you're doing it right, but before you was giving the number, whatever number.
Why you want to bring up what I did wrong? Why you want to keep on bringing that up?
I'm sorry.
Thank you very much. 516-620-3602. That's my baby. Ife's my baby. Don't worry about that. 516-620-3602. Call us here for a $125 pledge. We will send you this DVD. It's incredible. I'm telling you, listen to it. And folks, I know that you're hearing it and you may see in between. It kind of gets low sometimes, the low energy. But when you see the pictures, you're going to like flip out.
Don't watch it before you're going outside. It's one of those kind of.
No, don't watch it. No, don't watch it and go to work. Don't watch it and have a bad boss.
Exactly.
Don't watch it and go see your child, in the joint or go to court because you're going to go off.
Yeah.
This is that kind of.
I mean, because you're seeing people sitting down, and someone just punks. They're basically punks. Come up behind you, punching them in the face.
You see
women
being beaten. You seen black men in suits and ties. So they made everybody have suits and ties. You remember the little stingy brim they used to use? That. So what we have today is a direct result of the Freedom Riders. Mm-hmm. And I'd like us to remember that they were black and white, no doubt about it. And they fought hard. And we can get mad that things are not being done today. But things are not being done today because we have not taught our children who they were. If they knew that they were sons and daughters of warriors, we talk about African kings and queens and the pharaohs, and I got that. And I'm all for it, Dr. Ben Buchanan, who, by the way, is Puerto Rican. I like to mention that because people, what? Half his mother was Puerto Rican. And he speaks excellent Spanish. He's a little on in age now and in a nursing home. But I'll always remember him sitting at Sylvia's with us telling us about Egypt. Mm. And it was 1967, and I was in the Poets, and I would sit with him and get some smothered chicken from Sylvia's. And she would say, and I didn't have any money. And she would say, it's all right, baby. You give it to me when you can. That's Sylvia. She passed on too. I'm going to start crying over because so many people have died. Yeah. Abby O'Doon and I would go up there. Dylan Kane would go up there. David Nelson and I. Sylvia's, when it was just a little counter between 125th and 126th Street. It was a wonderful place to be. And Dr. Ben would eat there all the time. So I learned so much from him. He had these huge books. I wish I had bought them. He had these huge books that he would sell about Egypt. He's gone to Egypt, and he's actually torn apart the arguments of most folks who say black people didn't do anything. And when because what they do at Egypt is they always try to make them not black. Mm-hmm. They always look like Ricky Martin. It's not happening. They were black people. Mm-hmm. So I love Dr. Ben Buchanan. Anyway, I remember those days, and I think that it gives me the incentive to continue doing what I'm doing today. We need to teach our children about this. So, folks, call us here at 516-620-3602. We haven't had any Lower East Side, no East Harlem.
Well, I was going to say, we did have one person so far from Harlem. So far.
Who?
Amina.
Amina, how are you? Thank you.
Amina from Harlem. Brooklyn came through. Antoinette from Brooklyn. And also from Chestnut Ridge, New York, Daryl.
Ooh, I'd like to go up there. We should go visit Daryl at Chestnut Ridge. That sounds nice. They may have horses.
Well, Chestnut Ridge, so thank you, Daryl.
Thank you, Daryl.
But we need more people to call up. 516-620-3602. Now, I need to look at it before I say the wrong number. Do a Felipe.
516-620-3602.
And you can get your copy, your DVD, Freedom on My Mind. You've heard a few clips of it since 6 a.m. this morning. But we need more people to call up and join those callers that's on the line. 516-620-3602. We've been listening to Felipe's stories as well, and as he was his monologue.
My soliloquies.
Earlier, and he was feeling it, and hopefully you're feeling it, and you would really feel it if you actually if you saw the DVD. It's incredible. It's absolutely incredible.
You know what happens, Ife? Sometimes the old guys get together, and we sit, and our children are around us, and they see us hugging each other. They have no idea. Say, Daddy, that guy looks lethal. And I say, yeah, he is lethal. He wasn't taking no stuff 40 years ago. And you sit with I try to bring my son with me to all of them. One day, Keith Wright was having a rally about his father. They were naming a street after his father. And I brought my son with me. He said, Daddy, this is the elite of Harlem. I said, they weren't the elite 40 years ago. And he met Keith. He met all of the people there. And he was amazed at how many of these brothers are still alive. I said, a lot of us aren't. You know, when you think about it, a lot of the Panthers, a lot of the Lords, a lot of the Black Liberation Army, Republic of New Africa, remember them? I remember admiring Herman Ferguson, who had to flee to Guyana. I mean, there are people, and not even though those are the names. Imagine the people who fought and died in Mississippi and Alabama, the Delta area, and never got any credit. So I thank black people for having fought for Puerto Ricans. You say, well, they didn't fight. Yes, they did. Because we were able to be inspired by their move. And by the way, the women's movement did it too. The gay movement did it too. Had it not been for black people, all of these movements would have been retarded for about 10 or 20 years. Not that they wouldn't have occurred, Ife. They would have occurred, but
there was a model set.
There was a model set already. People, and I mean a model set in blood. Call us here at 516-620-3602. Give us, you pledge to us $125, and we will give you this DVD.
An incredible DVD. And as you said earlier already, it wasn't just a black thing. You know, there were white folks sitting right there at the counter as well.
That's right.
And so this is just American history. And all folks need to call up right now. 516-620-3602. Freedom on My Mind is the name of the DVD. $125 is how much it is to pledge for this DVD. But we need more people on the line. We do not have enough people. I mean, there's way too many people in New York
for us not to get. And by the way, you need to have this for your life. For those of you who are teachers and social workers, we're on the right path. Doctors and lawyers, you need to have this for your children and for your clients. You need to teach this in school. People will say, well, fourth graders, fifth graders need to see this. I'm not averse. I'm not beyond putting this on for young children so that they understand what happened. For young black children, too many of us are forgetting our history. Too many of us are taking things for granted. Too many of us are jumping in white folks' faces. Because there'll be white people who will say, many of them, liberals, well, I was there. And they're older now. Now we're asking them to be like Black Panthers. They were there when they had to be there. You ain't do nothing for me, man. And it blows my mind when I see that. I say, man, why don't you chill out a little bit, man? That guy was part of a movement. I don't care. He ain't doing nothing for me now. It's like, what have you done for me lately? And what's love got to do with it? We got to stop that. Give credit to the pioneers. Give credit to because if you give credit to the pioneers, you will be given credit as you get older. I've heard too many young people say, well, I don't care if they old. I don't care if how old they got, how many wrinkles. If they jump in my face, I can't believe how people don't respect older people.
Yeah.
I see this on the subways all the time. A sister will say, baby, she didn't have to, I just jump up here. And thank you so much. And I love to sit on trains. I love to sit. I don't like to stand, Ife.
Well, you are Felipe.
Yeah, I love to sit down. And I watch people. Or you'll see some older brother that I've seen in the movement. He's down on his luck now. He's, a little homeless. He's going through it. He's in a shelter. But I knew that he was part of the movement. I used to see him. I will hug him and kiss him. My brother says, them cooties jump on you now. Be careful. When you start itching and scratching, don't get, you better be careful. I don't care. These are the people, the men and women or you find that sister who may be obese, or maybe lacks all her teeth. But she was there in 1967. We were on 125th Street. She was there at the state office building. How dare us not give them honor? So I hugged them and kissed them.
Well, that's all about not knowing the history. So if they don't know, then, it's all about teaching.
Yeah, I still say if you see an older person.
No, you're absolutely right.
You give them credit.
No, you're absolutely right. But if you also don't know their history, then.
I tell them all the time, I see a Puerto Rican, I see these old Puerto Rican gang members from the Viceroys and the Dragons, and they'll go by, Felipe, and I say, in fact, let me tell you about Puerto Ricans. If you don't say hello, they'll say, oh, excuse me, have you gotten to that point where you don't talk to poor people anymore? Mm-hmm. They'll stop you right in the middle of the street. Mm-hmm. And you say, no, señora, no es eso. They say, no, espérate, porque, you've gotten real. We have a saying called come. Those of you who know Spanish know what I'm saying. It's like sedidly, but it's a worse version of sedidly. Mm-hmm. And their thing is, don't get so stupid. I remember you. I remember when I hit you. I remember when this and that. And sisters who loved on you, these Puerto Rican sisters, and they look at you now, they're a little heavier now, and they put their hands on their hips and say, come over here and give me some sugar. And what are you going to do? Say no? Plus, I love being
about to say, and you will not say no.
Hell no. I love being hugged. I love being hugged. I love hugging. It's WBAI in New York, 99.5
Should we go back?
on your FM. Yes. The number here to call for this $125 pledge, $125, is 516-620-3602. This is about the Freedom Riders, a DVD called Freedom on My Mind.
Sad was like, that was enough for me to go find the cat that killed her, relieve myself,
Her release sort of symbolized signing over in blood, right, to the struggle, so that it was clear now, well, they will have to kill us to get us out of here.
Kofo set out to organize the rest of the state.
This was something that we had not had. We had not really thought about it a lot. Certainly I had not. It was just something you expected never to participate in. And all of a sudden, whatever had been going on in the rest of the world was coming to Mississippi. And we were going to be part of it. We had heard about people who had been beaten. We'd known about the folks who'd been killed for trying to exercise this privilege. When they got to Shelby, we were ready. We were just saying, tell us what to do and where to go.
Get your rights, Jack, and don't be a dog no more, no more, no more, no more. Get your rights, Jack, and don't be a dog no more.
We go to the church and make up the flyers and pass them out, and people come to church and we talk, and somebody come tell us we got to get out of town. We get on out of town, go to the next town.
And we were eagerly anticipating the folks coming to bring freedom to Mississippi.
We load up in the car, we get over there early in the morning, we stop at this big fat preacher's house and tell him what we're there for, and he's so excited. And his wife starts bringing out the sausage and the biscuits and the molasses and the milk, and every time we empty the table, she bring out some more, and we just eat ourselves to death.
I heard that some outside agitators had come to town to stir up trouble between the whites and the colors, and that they weren't going to have anything to do with them. I immediately started looking for them, because if they was new men in town, I wanted to turn a trick with them. I figured maybe they'd have some money. I was trying to walk behind him and talk, hey there, hey you. You know, he wasn't studying about me, and all he was interested in is getting me into the office to work. So when he opened the door to go inside, I looked inside and I saw Emma Bell who's a legend in the civil rights movement. I saw her sitting at a typewriter typing, and I had never seen a black woman that could type like this woman could type. You know, she was typing, she wasn't even looking down at the paper. So I said to myself, oh, she's typing a whole lot of P's and Q's. She don't know what she's doing. And I went on inside the office. I was scared to death because Mama had told me, don't go down near that fooling with those folks because she had to live in this town. And I went on inside. The first thing I did once I got inside was to go look over Emma Bell's shoulder and see what she really was typing. She hadn't missed a word.
The people had read in the state newspapers, you know, the regular media, that these people are communists, these people are, etc. And the black community was about as afraid of them as anybody else, you know.
My mother was dismayed. She was scared. She was disgusted. She would always say to my other sisters and brothers, well, this old girl, this child that I've had, she's the biggest fool in the world. She'll run out there and get involved against the white folk. And she would always tell me, girl, don't you bring none of them freedom riders here to my house.
Not a single church would receive them. And so we opened St. John to them in Palmer's Crossing.
We have been thinking that the white people kept us down. But they didn't. You know what did it? Our fear of a jailhouse kept us down.
We would quote from the Bible sometimes. We'd make a subject and a text, just like the preacher would do it. You know, I remember my favorite sermon was Moses and his stick, and the stick was the vote.
And then they completed that by asking for a show of hands of people who would be willing to go down to the courthouse tomorrow. I expected to see lots of hands go up. They didn't, so, you know, I raised mine, and 3 men, bus drivers, school bus drivers, we were the ones who committed to going to the courthouse. We went down today, and by tonight, probably the bus drivers didn't have a job, certainly not later than the next day. All the bus drivers had been fired.
One day I was up in North Bolivar County, out from Alligator, someplace on a plantation, and I went up to this white man and told him who I was, and that I wanted to see if he had any objection to me talking to his people about registering to vote. And he was so nice. He said, no, I don't. And I was saying, oh, gee, this is going to be a piece of cake. And as I was walking away, he called to me and said, oh, by the way, when you finish registering to vote, don't bring them back here. Take them to your house. And that just stopped me cold, because I was living in this condemned house myself that wasn't fit for people to be living in. I had no place. I had no job. You were asking people to challenge the system and traditions, and you had to be prepared for the responsibility of what happened to those folks when they followed your instructions or listened to your pleadings or decided to join the movement with you on the spot. That you became responsible for the folks and their families and their welfare.
The Delta was really a terrible sight during this period. I mean, you drive through those plantations. A plantation shack was really a one-room house falling down. That was the typical plantation shack, with pieces of lumber and tin and stuff flying different directions, and rotted porches and hanging doors and busted out windows. I mean, it was just terrible conditions that people would be living in.
Felipe Luciano, WBAI 99.5 on your FM dial. If we can get any people to call here for a pledge, with a pledge of $125 at 516-620-3602, you will be building a legacy for yourself. Pick up this DVD. It's called Freedom on My Mind. Tell your children how we got here. Tell your children how voting rights came into being. It didn't happen overnight. From 59 right through 61, right through 60, right through all of this, we were in the process of achieving our freedom. And it only happened because we decided to integrate lunch counters. We decided to integrate bus. Do you understand that when you got down south They would make you get off the bus and move, and you change buses, and you had to go to the back of the bus. There is the story of a Puerto Rican soldier. It's an anecdote. Who, when told he had to go to the back of the bus, said, "No, you don't understand. I know black. I pick up Spanish. I'm Spanish." They said, we don't care what kind of black you are. You better get your butt to the back." And sure enough, he went back there because he understood what time it was. There are a lot of Latinos who found out they were black when they were shifted to black units. Machito was peeling spuds. Tito was a lowly sailor. Others were given commissions. Glenn Miller was given a lieutenant's commission. He was up there in the plane. Of course, he died. And God bless him. I mean, he died fighting for a good cause against fascism. We had a guy at Albizu Campos who's like on Malcolm X, who got transferred to a black unit and got mad. And I love Albizu. My whole family are nationalists. All my family have followed him since the beginning. My grandmother, my father's mother, was with him in Ponce in 1937 when they massacred, the U.S. troops massacred, or Puerto Rican troops massacred Puerto Ricans in their fight for freedom. My second uncle, Carmelo, spent 10 years with him in prison. He was his bodyguard. So when I talk about Puerto Rican independence, it only comes from that bloodline. My mother was raised me Pentecostal. I didn't know. That's why it's so bad when mothers and fathers who break up don't become friends, because you never know your father's family. You don't know who you may be related to. I didn't know I had this in my blood. One day my father came over to the office, rest his soul. He died last year, as you know. And he said, no, this year. And he said, Felipe.
Last year.
Was it last year? Thank you, Ife. And he said, look, do you know, you're scaring me. I don't know. All our family's been like this. It turns out that Puerto Rican independence is in my blood. So, and by the way, so Albizu got so mad that he was considered black that from that point on, he hated the United States. Not that he didn't hate him before, but he hated him even more. Not the right reason to hate. You know what I'm saying? But he was perceived of and considered because he was dark-skinned. So we got loads of stuff that we are intertwined with. I've always said that. Here in the city, Latinos, we already know how powerful we are. I hope you know this, that without us, Obama would not have won. Now what we need to do is put that power together, along with Dominicans. We'd have a powerful, imagine all of that group, all of these black folk together. It would be tremendous, man.
But they have to call that number, which is because we're running down. We're running down, down on time. 516-620-3602. And I know you want to get to your phone, but we really need people to call up right now and pledge for $125. Freedom on My Mind is the name of the DVD. We haven't even gotten to half of it.
Wait a minute. I got a friend, Ramon Jimenez. He needs to send us $125.
Here he goes.
Yeah, I'm gonna start.
You start naming people.
I start naming them.
At the end of your show.
I better not preach, boy. I be talking to people. and you. I saw you. There was a preacher that used to say, I saw them in the bar, and I used to tell the preacher, how'd you see him? What were you doing?
but now I would like to see these people call, because you can't hear the phones, but I can see your emails. The emails going through saying that someone pledged, and just like Yolanda from Hackensack, New Jersey, and Delroy from Uniondale, New York. We having a few people from Long Island. There was a call from Freeport as well. I stayed in Freeport for a little second.
That's Jones Beach. I like Freeport.
Yeah, Freeport is cool.
Nice black town.
Because it was yeah, exactly. Nice, but it was close enough to my school. I was going to Five Towns out in Dix Hills.
Get out of here! You went to Five Towns?
Mm-hmm.
Ain't that something?
516-620-3602.
You got a little sophistication to you, yeah.
3602. 516-620-3602.
Well, you know what I found out?
The DVD is called Freedom on My Mind.
Freedom on My Mind.
And I know you want to get to your poem.
Yes. You know what I found out? That Reverend Mike from FCBC, from First Corinthian Baptist Church, was brought up in wine dance.
Mm-hmm.
No, was brought up in Roosevelt. You know Roosevelt is crazy.
Yes.
Those Negroes out there don't play.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why their mothers brought them out there. They figured they were going to get sedentary. They were going to move out to suburbia. They became better gangsters.
Oh, well, people don't understand. There are parts of Long Island
that are serious. Wine dance is one of them.
Yes. First time I went out there, I didn't realize how it's a big difference.
It's funky. Yeah. Well, let me tell you something. Puerto Ricans went out to Brentwood, Long Island. They took their children all the way out to Brentwood, and they said, we're going to have a nice suburban. You know what happened? They became Latin kings. That's what happened. 516-620-3602.
3602. Freedom on My Mind is the name of the DVD. We have 8 minutes to go. Well, 3 minutes left because we're going to get to Felipe's poem. But we need you to call right now. We need you to get on the phone. This is the last time Felipe will be doing the fund drive, and we need you to call right now. 516-620-3602. If you love the show, and don't forget, if you're listening in online, we haven't said that yet. If you're listening in and you're right on your computer, you can go to give to, that's the number 2, WBAI.org, and you can pledge right there. The name of the DVD is Freedom on My Mind. Or if you're not really interested in a DVD, I don't know why you wouldn't be, but if you're not and you just want to pledge in the name of the show, you can do that as well. You can say, look, I love Felipe, I love listening to him. Like you said, the young lady said to you that she's upset.
Cheryl, she said, I want to, she gave me a book of poetry.
Well, she can pledge in the name, Cheryl, you can pledge in the name of the show.
How you like that?
For
How you like them
$25,
apples?
$50, $500. I would love to see $1,000 pledge. I would love to see $1,000 pledge.
Wouldn't that be great?
Before
when I make some money,
ends.
I'll do it. I'll do it for you, Faye. 516-620. I'd love to see it before the show ends.
Before this show ends, 1,000, even 500.
And I don't care how they made it. 516-620-3602. I'd like to see a Dominican offer some money. That would be great. 516-620-3602.
But why Dominican?
I don't know. I'm into them these days. I talk to them all the time, and I ask them what are the differences, what they feel about us, how they feel about Puerto Ricans, how they feel about black people. You'd be surprised at how many of them are affecting black styles. Mm-hmm. They got dreadlocks now. Remember, when they came here, they didn't want to be black. If you said they were black, they'd cut you about 3 ways, long, deep, and serious. But now, they walk around, and you can't, you know what I mean? If you're not aware, and these are big Africans, man, but they're getting into it, and it's nice to see it. And the music is getting hip and slick. Bachata is the thing now. You can't go anywhere without hearing bachata. I'm getting a little tired of it myself, but that's what you hear, and it's hip. Poem is called Yusef, dedicated to Yusef Hawkins. The chill of Bensonhurst and Yusef is that no trees grow in Brooklyn. Only weeds with bad names. No memory of bloods who bought pretty brownstones they paid for. Or Italians who teach bloods because they love nappy-headed kids with bright eyes for books. And Rican pioneers who came here on rusty tankers to build urban dreams and play with the rainbows they brought from the beaches that have welcomed strangers for centuries. Even when they had bad manners, bad breath, and horrible thoughts. Yusef never visited Borinquen, never traveled outside his country, yet died clutching an American candy bar in shock at the senselessness of it all. It's not sorrow I feel, not rage anymore, just a sense of impending doom for Brooklyn and the rest of the counties in this cold-hearted, beautiful country. 'Cause I already know the depth of black love and suicide. Soon, it will not matter. Life, smiles, double Dutch, skelly, crack, heroin, numbers, church, even babies, none of it will matter. And ladies and gentlemen, please believe me. When black people march to the sea, they'll take America with them. And no one will be able to stop the hurricane of hate. It'll be said later amidst the ruins of broken buildings and bones when the streets become truly integrated with everyone's thick blood that it began in Brooklyn over the death of a pretty satin black-skinned teenager who wanted to learn, who had earned enough to buy a used car in Bensonhurst and believed enough in himself and his personal goodness to walk down a street of no dreams and no memory except that of hatred and fear, of contact with the people who came here in chains and are still trying to get out of them. The pity, the real tragedy is that every time one of them sets himself free, a bullet meets his heart and reminds the others that slavery is real profitable, real serious, and designed in spite of the Constitution to kill kids who think that because they can read and dream that they're American. We're in the last part of this nightmare. And as a black king bellowed, how long, not long before this terrible apathy turns into terror, the likes of which no nation has ever seen or felt. It'll be physical and very deeply personal. Dolphins will turn into tiger sharks, and the seas of this city will not be safe anymore because there's simply nothing to lose. Murder will not be a reaction. It'll be a premeditated plan, and the sons and daughters of black kingdoms that gave the world mathematics will teach the leaders and followers of ignorance that if there is no addition, there can only be subtraction based on the multiplication of black children divided by everything and left with nothing. And those wise teachers who survive will never ask their students how they arrived at the answers. It'll be clear, because after and by then the hearts of everyone will have been not only touched but scarred. The memories will be non-erasable. And hopefully, every newborn will be born with the reasons of not what to think, but how to think. In a new way. In a new way. In a new way. In a new way. Thanks very much for listening. Poem was called Yusef. Take care of yourselves. God bless you. Love each other. Love yourselves mainly. We still have a couple of minutes. 516-620-3602. 516-620-3602. I can't wait till I really record these things with music, and then we can use that as a pledge item.
Well, I did say that before, didn't I?
Yes, you did. Yes, you did.
You don't
Honestly,
listen to me. 516-62. What?
Why do black women always say that? You never listen to me. You never listen to me. I save you. I help you.
3602. And can I thank Sheila from Montclair, New Jersey, and Donald from Hackensack, New Jersey for calling?
Thank you, Sheila and Donald. Thank you so much.
Jersey really came through. We need more people from Harlem in the last minute.
In the last minute. The number here is 516-620-3602. 516-620-3602. My boy Rick Young is finishing his show too over on Harlem.
He looks finished.
He's done, huh? He probably put music on. We go to the very end.
Well, we're trying to get money to the very end.
We're trying to make some money here. 516-620-3602. This is called The Freedom Riders. You've got to get to see DVD. And I always tell grandmothers, please take your children, instead of having them watch BET and all of the other stuff, much of it nonsense, sit down and go with your children through the history of black folk. And say, this is what happened. It's going to get them mad. Make sure that you are with them. Make sure that because you see the anger really hasn't been felt. Make sure that you sit with them and not let them go outside after they see this film. About that time, we'll talk to you next week. Peace!
Hi, this is Jerry Stiller. You are listening to WBAI New York 99.5 FM and WBAI.org on the web. Where are my keys? Anybody see my keys? Who took my keys?
From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
We can do no greater honor to her memory than to carry forward the power of her principle and a courage born of conviction. May God bless the memory of Rosa Parks.
As President Obama unveils a statue of Rosa Parks at the U.S. Capitol, the Supreme Court considers overturning a key achievement of the civil rights era, the 1965 Voting Rights Act. Justice Scalia described the law as a perpetuation of racial entitlement. Justice Sonia Sotomayor fought back. Then 40 years of solitary confinement.
If a cause is noble enough, you can carry the weight of the world on your shoulders. And I thought that my cause, then and now, was noble. So therefore, they could never break me. They might bend me a little bit. They may cause me a lot of pain. They may even take my life. But they will never be able to break me.
A federal judge has ordered Louisiana release former Black Panther Albert Woodfox. He and Herman Wallace have served nearly 40 years in solitary confinement in the notorious maximum security Louisiana State Penitentiary known as Angola. We'll speak with Robert King, the third of the Angola Three. He was there for decades, but is now free. And on Pope Benedict's final day in office, we speak with former Catholic priest Matthew Fox, author of The Pope's War, Why Ratzinger's Secret Crusade Has Imperiled the Church and How It Can Be Saved. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. President Obama and congressional Republicans are planning last-ditch talks in a bid to reach a deal before Friday's sequester deadline. The impasse centers around Republican opposition to Obama's call for ending tax loopholes favoring the wealthy. Speaking to the Business Council in Washington, Obama gave a nod to Republicans and acknowledging he's willing to cut social spending in return for ending tax breaks.
Democrats have to accept the need for entitlement reform. But it also means that Republicans have to accept the need for additional revenues if we're going to be able to actually close this deficit and provide the kind of certainty that you need to make your long-term investments. I think it was Winston Churchill who once said that Americans always do the right thing after they've exhausted every other possibility. And we're getting to the point where we've now exhausted every other possibility.
The Senate is expected to vote today on both parties' competing plans. A new Republican proposal would allow the sequestration deadline to pass, but give Congress until late March to decide how the $85 billion in spending cuts would take effect. The Senate's confirmed Treasury Secretary Jack Lew in a 71-26 vote. Lew was an executive at Citigroup from 2006 to 2008 at the time of the financial crisis and a longtime proponent of deregulating Wall Street. In a statement, independent Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont explained his vote against Lew, saying, quote, "We need a Secretary of the Treasury who does not come from Wall Street but is prepared to stand up to the enormous power of Wall Street." The Senate Intelligence Committee has again delayed its vote on the confirmation of CIA nominee John Brennan. The vote has been stalled in a standoff over the release of legal memos justifying the administration's assassination program, which Brennan has overseen. The committee is now expected to vote on Brennan next week. Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel, meanwhile, was sworn in Wednesday, one day after his confirmation was approved. Hagel kicked off his tenure with an address to Pentagon staff.
A couple of hours ago, took the oath of office to become the 24th Secretary of Defense. It's a great honor. It's a privilege. Yes, for me, my family, but to be part of your team, who you are, is the honor. That's the great privilege. You're not joining my team, I'm joining your team.
The Senate Judiciary Committee held a hearing Wednesday on the proposal for reinstating the military assault weapons ban. In the hearing's most testy exchange, Wisconsin Police Chief Ed Flynn sparred with Republican Senator Lindsey Graham on whether the ban would reduce killings.
From my point of view, Senator, the purpose of the background check...
How many cases have you made? How many cases
it doesn't matter. It's a paper thing.
Well,
I want to stop 76... I want to finish the answer.
Well, no,
I want to stop 76,000 people from buying guns illegally. That's what a background check does. If you think we're going to do paperwork prosecutions, you're wrong.
Also appearing before the panel was Neil Heslin, the father of 6-year-old Newtown victim Jesse Lewis. Heslin made a tearful appeal for lawmakers to ban assault weapons.
That's a dangerous weapon, and anybody that can deny or argue that isn't being honest. Jesse was 6.5 years old. His birthday was June 30th, 2006. He was born. It was the happiest day of my life. Saddest day of my life was December 14th. It was the worst day of my life.
The Obama administration's increasing aid to rebels fighting Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. The Washington Post reports the U.S. may provide military supplies, including body armor and armed vehicles. Without revealing details, White House spokesperson Jay Carney confirmed plans to assist the rebels.
We will continue to provide assistance to the Syrian people, to the Syrian opposition. We will continue to increase our assistance in the effort to bring about a post-Assad Syria and a better path forward for the Syrian people.
The New York Times reports U.S. training of Syrian rebels is underway at a military base in an unspecified regional country. At a summit today in Rome, Secretary of State John Kerry announced $60 million in new aid for the Syrian opposition. The oil giant Shell has announced it will not drill for oil in Alaska this year. Shell's bid to begin exploratory drilling in the Arctic was approved last summer over the objections of indigenous and environmental groups. But Shell now says it will delay drilling after a series of mishaps. Former Illinois state lawmaker Robin Kelly has won the Democratic primary to replace former Congressmember Jesse Jackson Jr. Kelly was aided by more than $2 million in spending by Independence USA, the super PAC of New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg. Independents flooded the airwaves with attack ads highlighting the pro-gun record of Kelly's chief rival, former Congressmember Debbie Halverson. The Illinois special election to fill Jackson's vacant House seat will be held in April. A federal judge has ordered the release of 2 Seattle activists who've been jailed for refusing to testify before a grand jury. Catherine Olejic and Matt Duran have been held without charge for 5 months, including 2 months in solitary confinement. They were imprisoned after refusing to appear before a grand jury reportedly investigating property damage at a Seattle courthouse on May 1st. Although neither were present when the damage occurred, they were subpoenaed to answer background questions about potential suspects. The former French resistance fighter Stéphane Hessel has died at the age of 95. Hessel joined the French resistance during World War II, was caught by the Gestapo and sent to Buchenwald concentration camp. He escaped during transfer to Bergen-Belsen and later helped draft the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights. In 2010, he became an unlikely best-selling author when his pamphlet-length book, Time for Outrage, sold millions of copies around the world and helped inspire protests like Occupy Wall Street. As the movement spread in the fall of 2011, Hessel explained to Democracy Now! Why he's encouraged by nonviolent resistance.
It is proper for the young generation to listen to the very old ones who tell them, we have been resistors at a time where there was fascism or Stalinism. You must find the things that you will not accept, that will outrage you, and these things you must be able to fight against non-violently, peacefully, but determinedly. That is why I'm so happy about what happens these days in Wall Street, because they're indeed very peaceful. They're not throwing any bombs or any stones, but they're there determined to see that their values are to be respected.
The late former French resistance fighter Stéphane Hessel speaking on Democracy Now! In 2011. For the full interview Juan Gonzalez did with him, you can go to our website at democracynow.org. President Obama presided over a ceremony in Washington Wednesday unveiling a statue of the late civil rights pioneer Rosa Parks. On December 1st, 1955, Parks refused to give up her seat to a white passenger on a city bus in Montgomery, Alabama. Her act of resistance led to a 13-month boycott of the Montgomery bus system that would help spark the civil rights movement.
She lived a life of activism, but also a life of dignity and grace. And in a single moment, with the simplest of gestures, she helped change America and change the world. Rosa Parks' singular act of disobedience launched a movement. The tired feet of those who walked the dusty roads of Montgomery helped a nation see that to which it had once been blind. It is because of these men and women that I stand here today. It is because of them that our children grow up in a land more free and more fair, a land truer to its founding creed.
You can go to our website at democracynow.org for our hour-long special on Rosa Parks with historian Jean Theoharis, author of the new biography, The Rebellious Life of Mrs. Rosa Parks. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.
And I'm Juan Gonzalez. Welcome to all of our listeners and viewers around the country and around the world. We begin today with a look at key provisions of the landmark Voting Rights Act that came under fire Wednesday in a hearing before the U.S. Supreme Court. The act was signed in 1965 by President Lyndon Johnson. It requires several states and counties with a history of racial discrimination to clear election-related changes with the federal government. At the same time the court was hearing the case, President Obama was unveiling a statue in the Capitol that honors the late civil rights leader Rosa Parks, who was present when President Johnson signed the act.
It's been often remarked that Rosa Parks' activism didn't begin on that bus. Long before she made headlines, she had stood up for freedom, stood up for equality, fighting for voting rights, rallying against discrimination in the criminal justice system, serving in the local chapter of the NAACP. Her quiet leadership would continue long after she became an icon of the civil rights movement, working with Congressman Conyers to find homes for the homeless, preparing disadvantaged youth for a path to success, striving each day to right some wrong somewhere in this world.
Another lawmaker attending the unveiling of the Rosa Parks statue was 13-term Congressman John Lewis of Georgia. Lewis was almost killed when he marched during the 1965 Bloody Sunday March to Selma, Alabama, to demand the right to vote. When he was recently on Democracy Now!, Lewis described the Voting Rights Act that is now facing scrutiny before the Supreme Court.
The Voting Rights Act of 1965 said, in effect, that you cannot use the literacy test, you cannot have a poll tax, you cannot use certain devices, you cannot harass, you cannot intimidate. And before you make any changes in election laws dealing with registration, changing a precinct, local lines for any political position, you have to get pre-clearance from the Department of Justice or the Federal District Court in Washington, D.C.
The Voting Rights Act has been challenged by Shelby County, Alabama, which argued the pre-clearance requirement has outlived its usefulness. The Supreme Court's 4 liberal justices appeared willing to agree with Congress that more progress needs to be made before freeing states from the special federal monitoring, but conservative justices were much more critical. Justice Antonin Scalia called the act a, quote, perpetuation of racial entitlement. Justice Sonia Sotomayor fought back over that claim. For more, we're joined now by the nation's Ari Berman, who was at the court covering the hearing. His recent in-depth article about the case asks, why are conservatives trying to destroy the Voting Rights Act? We welcome you back to Democracy Now!, Ari. Explain what the justices were arguing or what their questions were yesterday in the Supreme Court.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me back, Amy and Juan. And the conservative justices, 4 of them, and in many respects, Anthony Kennedy as a 5th, were concerned about really 2 things. Number one, does the Voting Rights Act cover the right states? So is Section 5 still targeted at those places where discrimination is most prevalent? And then number 2, the second thing that they were concerned about is there a replacement for Section 5? Because they view Section 5 in many cases as an infringement on state sovereignty. So they were wondering, do other provisions of the Voting Rights Act, such as Section 2, could it be an adequate replacement? And the people that were defending the Voting Rights Act, both Solicitor General Donald Verrilli and Debo Adegbile of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, said that yes, discrimination is still targeted in those states covered by Section 5, and there is no replacement for Section 5. It's the only section of the Voting Rights Act that puts the burden of proof on the discriminators themselves to have to prove that a voting change is not discriminatory. So it's the only preemptive weapon in federal law to stop discriminatory voting changes, and that's what makes it so powerful.
And Ari, on the exchange, it was not a direct exchange between Sonia Sotomayor and Justice Scalia. Could you talk about that? Because I think it's the first time that Justice Sotomayor comes out clearly in a court hearing so strongly opposed to one of her fellow justices.
Well, Scalia made the outrageous statement that the Voting Rights Act is a perpetuation of racial entitlement, and that's why Congress has supported it so overwhelmingly. And Scalia basically said that the overwhelming congressional support for the Voting Rights Act means it must be unconstitutional. And Sotomayor basically said discrimination is discrimination. It's ongoing today. This is not racial entitlement. This is about a basic fundamental right that for so many years America ignored. And she said to Shelby County, the county that's bringing the state, you don't have the standing to bring this challenge because as recently as 2008, you were found by the Justice Department to be discriminating on the basis of race, doing a voting change that eliminated one of the only black districts in a city in the county. So Sotomayor basically said there was no basis to bring this challenge to the Voting Rights Act itself.
I want to turn to a clip going back in history from a documentary that recently featured King. It's called A Filmed Record, Montgomery to Memphis. This is President Lyndon Johnson speaking just as he is signing the Voting Rights Act in 1965. Over his shoulder is Dr. Martin Luther King, who speaks next. First, President Johnson.
Today is a triumph for freedom as huge as any victory that's ever been won on any battlefield. This law covers many pages, but the heart of the act is plain. Wherever, by clear and objective standards, states and counties are using regulations or laws or tests to deny the right to vote, then they will be struck down. If it is clear that state officials still intend to discriminate, then federal examiners will be set in to register all eligible voters. This good Congress, the 89th Congress, acted swiftly in passing this act. And I intend to act with equal dispatch in enforcing this act.
I think the greatest victory of this period was not in terms of an external factor or an external development, but it was something internal. The real victory was what this period did to the psyche of the black man. The greatness of this period was that we armed ourselves with dignity and self-respect. Greatness of this period was that we straightened our backs up. And a man can't ride your back unless it's bent.
That was Dr. Martin Luther King, and before him, President Johnson from King, a filmed record, Montgomery to Memphis, the day President Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act. Ari Berman, where does it go from here as we hear the significance of this moment when this was signed in 1965?
Well, it's been such a transformative law. It's often been described as the most consequential law passed in the 20th century and really the high watermark of the civil rights movement. And Section 5 is the heart and soul of the Voting Rights Act. So if the Supreme Court was to get rid of Section 5 or to significantly narrow it, and we would know this in June when a decision comes down, there really is no substitute for it, and it would be a very devastating setback for voting rights, not just in the places where Section 5 is covered, but there's a thinking that if Section 5 goes, conservatives are going to start challenging those other provisions of the Voting Rights Act, like Section 2, which applies nationwide. The court has already limited Section 2 in many respects. So this would kind of be like the Citizens United decision for voting rights. It would open the floodgates to more voter suppression laws, more legal challenges, and it would make it difficult to enforce the voting rights laws that are on the books in addition to Section 5. And so there really is no substitute, and it would be one of the most radical and consequential decisions made by the court in a very long time.
And Ari, if you could just briefly tell us the difference between Section 2 and Section 5. Section 5 more is a pre-clearance situation where the Justice Department has to clear any proposed changes by states. And what would Section 2 be? Because at least Justice Kennedy was considering whether that would conceivably cover civil rights abuses in voting rights.
Yes, Section 5 pertains to 16 parts or all of 16 states with a history of racial discrimination in voting. It's temporary, it must be reauthorized, and it's preemptive, so the states have to clear those election changes. Section 2 is nationwide, it's permanent, but it puts the burden of proof on plaintiffs themselves to show that a voting change is discriminatory. Section 2 lawsuits are very long, they're very expensive, they're very difficult to win. So the best way that I think about it is Section 5 is like stopping a crime before it's happened, whereas Section 2 is like trying to solve a crime after it's occurred with no guarantees that you'll actually be able to solve the crime. So they're two very, very different things. They work in tandem, and in many ways, Section 2 would not be valid in those places where discrimination happens the most without the guarantees of Section 5. So the idea that we can just replace Section 2 for Section 5 is a very disturbing concept for voting rights advocates.
Ari Berman, I want to thank you for being with us, contributing writer for The Nation magazine. His recent in-depth article asks, why are conservatives trying to destroy the Voting Rights Act? When we come back, it's Pope Benedict's last day in office. We'll be speaking with a former Catholic priest who wrote the book, The Pope's War, Why Ratzinger's Secret Crusade Has Imperiled the Church and How It Can Be Saved. Stay with us. Irish Catholic boy, Shawnee and the Unity Squad. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez.
Well, as Pope Benedict formally steps down today, speculation mounts over who will become the next pope. On Wednesday, Pope Benedict bid an emotional farewell at his last general audience, saying he understood the gravity of his decision to become the first pontiff to resign in nearly 600 years. The 85-year-old pope cited ill health as the reasons for his departure. Addressing an estimated 150,000 supporters in St. Peter's Square, Pope Benedict said he is resigning for the good of the church.
In these past months, I have felt that my strength has decreased, and I have asked God, earnestly in prayer, to enlighten me, and with His light, make me take the right decision, not for my good, but for the good of the church. I have taken this step in full awareness of its gravity and also its rarity, however, with a profound serenity of spirit. Loving the church also means having the courage to take difficult and anguished choices, always having in mind the good of the church and not oneself.
I was deeply grateful for the understanding, support and prayers of so many of you, not only here in Rome, but also throughout the world. The decision I have made after much prayer is the fruit of a serene trust in God's will, the deep love of Christ's church. I will continue to accompany the church with my prayers, and I ask each of you pray for me.
Sexuality and the male-only priesthood, among other things. The Vatican ranks. For more, we go to... He's the author of The Pope's War, Why Ratzinger's Secret Crusade Has Imperiled the Church and How It Can Be Saved. He's a former Catholic priest who was first stopped from teaching liberation theology and creation spirituality by then Cardinal Ratzinger. Fox was then expelled from the Dominican order to which he belonged for 34 years. He currently serves as an Episcopal priest. Matthew Fox, welcome to Democracy Now! Can you first respond to the Pope stepping down and the significance?
Well, thank you, Amy and Juan. I really appreciate your journalism. It means a lot to a lot of us. Yeah, I think I'll take the Pope at his word here when he says he's tired. I would be tired too if I left as much devastation in my wake as he has. First as Inquisitor General under the previous Pope, he brought the Inquisition back. And it's true, I was one of the theologians expelled by him, but I list 104 others in my book. And it keeps growing. The list keeps growing. So that's how history will remember this man as bringing the Inquisition back, which is completely contrary to the spirit and the teachings of the Second Vatican Council, which was an effort to reform the Church. So I think he's stepping down because he can't take it anymore. It's become a viper's nest there. Obviously, the Vatican is. I really think that, as a theologian, I see the Holy Spirit at work in all this. I think that the Catholic Church, as we know it, the structure of the Vatican is passé. We're moving beyond it, and it's become a viper's nest. It's really sick what's going on. Obviously, the cover-up of the pedophile priests, and you can see it everywhere. Cardinal Mahoney in Los Angeles is cardinal in Scotland. Cardinal Law, who was elevated after he left Boston, given a promotion, running a 4th century basilica in Rome. And this Pope himself, the recent documentary came out a week or two ago from HBO about how the buck stopped with him regarding these horrible things that went on at a school for the deaf in Milwaukee, where over 200 boys, deaf boys, were abused by a priest, and Ratzinger knew it. This Father Maciel, who was so close to the previous Pope that he took him on plane rides with him, abused 20 seminarians, and he had 2 wives on the side, and abused 4 of his own children. And Ratzinger knew about this man for 10 years. That document was on his desk, and he did nothing until the year 2005. So history and cheerleading of popes, what I call papalatry, will not cover up the facts. This has been the most sordid 42 years of Catholic history since the Borgias. And as I say, I think it's really about ending that church as we know it. I think Protestantism, too, needs a reboot. I think all of Christianity can get back more to the teachings of Jesus, a revolutionary around love and justice. That's what it's about. And that's why there's been such fierce resistance all along from the right wing. The CIA has been involved in especially with Pope John Paul II, that the decimation of liberation theology all over South America, the replacing of these heroic leaders, including bishops and cardinals, with Opus Dei cardinals and bishops who are well, frankly, it's a fascist organization, Opus Dei is. It's all about obedience. It's not about ideas or theology. They haven't produced one theologian in 40 years. They produce canon lawyers and people who infiltrate where the power is, whether it's the media, the Supreme Court, or the FBI, the CIA, and finance, especially in Europe.
Well,
so
I'd like to ask you
it's been a very sordid mess that's been going on.
In some of your writings, you have raised the point of view that both Pope Benedict and his predecessor John Paul were actually leading a schism, and that in fact that they were attempting to overthrow the decisions of the Second Vatican Council. But for many Americans who are no longer familiar because they're young, they don't know about the impact of the Second Vatican Council and Pope John the 23rd. Could you give us the broader historical movement that's occurred here?
Yes, Pope John the 23rd called the council in the early 60s, and it brought together all the bishops of the world and the theologians, many of whom had been under fire under the previous papacy, Pope Pius XII. And it definitely was a reform movement, and it gave inspiration to the poor, especially in South America. And after the council, the movement of liberation theology, which had a principle of preferential option for the poor, this really took off, and it created base communities, which was a new way of doing church, where everyone had a voice, not just the person at the altar. And this